This is my video update from Nicosia, Cyprus on this Saturday night, September the 9th. Let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with a Washington Post article from CNN's Fareed Zakaria. And the title of this article is, Ukrainians are determined to persevere, but they worry that their allies aren't. So let me read you a summary of this article from the Twitter account of Sprinter, and you'll get a better idea what this article is saying. It's an opinion article, by the way, from CNN's Fareed Zakaria. And the article says that some Ukrainian politicians are ready to freeze hostilities on the current front line in exchange for security guarantees from the West. After a trip to Kiev, American TV presenter Fareed Zakaria writes about this in a column for the Washington Post. According to him, the Ukrainian authorities are concerned about the weakening of Western support, including in the United States, and Ukrainians understand that they will face a long war of attrition. Zakaria added that many observers fear that if Trump is elected, he will make a mockery of the Ukrainians by negotiating with Putin. I think that's an excellent summary of this article. Now, keep in mind that this article was published right after Blinken's two-day visit to Kiev, and in a video that me and Alexander did on the Duran, Alexander put out the theory that perhaps Blinken was in Kiev for 2 days, which is very peculiar. It's very odd for any collective West leader to go to Ukraine and spend the night. Blinken was also accompanied by Cookies Newland as well. And usually leaders, they go to Kiev, they go in the morning via train. They get permission from the Russians, of course. They get permission from Putin to travel to Kiev. Putin says, okay, you're free. We're giving you free passage to Kiev to visit Elensky. They go in the morning. They shake Elensky's hand. They shoot some videos. They take some photos. They give Elensky a whole bunch of money. They give him a whole bunch of weapons. And then they leave in the afternoon, evening, with the train back to Poland. That's usually the routine that all of the collective West leaders perform when they travel to Kiev. But in this instance, we had Blinken and Newland go to Kiev and spend the night. They ate at McDonald's and then they left the next day. So this was a very interesting trip that the State Department made to Kiev, and Alexander put out the theory that definitely, there's a lot more to this trip than just Blinken going there to give Elensky $1 billion. And the theory that we put out there was that Blinken probably delivered some bad news to Elensky, and that bad news was the counteroffensive has failed, and we got to find a way to freeze this conflict along the lines of Korea, of the Korean War, an armistice, not a surrender, not a capitulation, not a peace agreement, but an armistice. And I think that Blinken, I think this theory is absolutely correct. Now that I read this article from Fareed Zakaria, I think that this theory is 100% spot on. It's speculation, of course, from Alexander, from myself, from the Duran, but that's what's going on here. That's what's going on. And Blinken went to Kiev. He said, look, the counteroffensive has failed. Maybe we can buy you some more time using the control that we have over collective West media. We can push the narrative about liberating Rabotinya for like the 100th time. You know, Ukraine, every day Ukraine is liberating Rabotinya, right? They've liberated it over and over and over again. And, you know, maybe they can buy another week or two of liberating Rabotinya, but that's it. That's it. Sooner or later, there's going to have to be some sort of a push to freeze this conflict, freezing the conflict, some sort of armistice with Russia. I bet the collective West is thinking if we can get some sort of armistice or freeze, buy ourselves 6 months, a year, 2 years, give Ukraine security guarantees, rearm Ukraine. Russia, they rearm themselves as well. They hold on to the territory that they have, and we can revisit conflict Ukraine after the elections. Something like that is being cooked up. Of course, the Russians have to agree to this, and I'll get to that later on in this video, how I think the collective West is going to try to force the Russians to agree to some sort of armistice. But this is what's at play here, and that's why right after Blinken's trip to Kiev, you have this article from CNN's Fareed Zakaria in the Washington Post. That's what's at play here. The narrative that you have Ukrainian politicians now coming to the realization that even though we can persevere, maybe it's best for us to freeze this conflict, get our security guarantees from the US, and freeze this thing. That's what the article is saying from the Washington Post. And it makes sense because should Trump win, well then, you know, the entire Project Ukraine could collapse, right? So let's see if we can freeze this thing. That's what this article is saying. Ukrainian politicians are now getting on board with. They're warming up to a Korea type of freeze of the conflict. Russia will never agree to this. I think Russia will never agree to this, but I think there's another side to this story, and that's the weapons escalation, which is how the collective West, in my opinion, believes they can force Russia into an armistice, into a freezing. So that brings me to the escalation. And we may have a big escalation on the part of the United States. ABC News, they put out an article yesterday where they say that the Biden White House is ready to provide ATACMS to the Elensky regime, ATACMS long-range missiles to the Elensky regime. Now, the interesting part about this news is that the excuse that was being made to not provide ATACMS to the Elensky regime, well, one of the big excuses that was being made, the main excuses that was being made is that the U.S. just doesn't have in their stockpiles ATACMS to spare. We just can't hand over ATACMS to Ukraine, even if we get guarantees from the Elensky regime that the ATACMS are not going to be used to strike Russian territory. Right? That's another problem with the long-range missiles. But they'll get written agreements and pinky, I swear, promises from the Elensky regime that they're not going to use the ATACMS to hit Russian territory. Right? So that problem is solved. But the other main problem that the Biden White House was saying with regards to providing ATACMS to the Elensky regime was that they just don't have enough. Just not enough ATACMS. What a beautiful cactus, huh? Just not enough ATACMS. But all of a sudden, according to ABC News, like magic, they found some spare ATACMS long-range missiles. And so now, providing the ATACMS to the Elensky regime is back on the table. Now, once the Elensky regime provides the ATACMS to Ukraine, if they haven't already, usually when they run these articles talking about the collective West providing weapons to Ukraine in a month or two, it usually means those weapons are either on the way or they've already arrived to the Elensky regime. But Once the U.S. provides ATACMS to Ukraine, then that opens up the way for Germany and for Olaf Scholz to green light the Taurus long-range missiles to Ukraine as well. And so I think the ATACMS have a range of something like 300 kilometers, and the Taurus, I think they have a range of, I want to say 1,000 kilometers, but I could be wrong about that. But that's going to be a huge escalation from Germany as well. Now, providing these ATACMS weapons, along with depleted uranium, which the Biden White House is now providing to Ukraine as well, is all of this together, ATACMS, Taurus, depleted uranium, is a massive escalation. But my thinking is that the Biden White House, the State Department, the neocons, they believe that by providing all of these weapons and striking Russian territory, striking Crimea, threatening Russia in this way, is going to be the stick that's going to push Russia to eventually accept a freeze. This is how I'm viewing everything that's going on. Once again, this is not an end to the conflict. This is not the U.S. saying that Ukraine has lost. This is not Ukraine surrendering. This is a way to get some sort of Korean-style armistice to this conflict in Ukraine to buy 6 months, 1 year, a year and a half of time. Time and space is what they're looking to get out of this. Definitely to take it past the November 2024 elections. And so Blinken goes to Kiev. He breaks the news to Elensky. Your counteroffensive has failed. It's a bust. We're not going to win this thing now. We need to buy some time and space. We need to freeze this thing. We need to rearm. We need to regroup. We need to get this past November 2024. We need to get this through the election campaign, the election cycle. And we're also going to need to find a way to force, to pressure, to leverage Russia into agreeing to a freeze. And so I think the escalation is what they're going to use to try and pressure the Russian government, to pressure Putin into some sort of freeze. You know, get those ATACMS, get those Taurus missiles, get that depleted uranium, get all that stuff directed towards Crimea, towards Russian territory, and get Putin to come to the table and say, okay, guys, I'll agree to freezing this thing. We're going to regroup as well as Russia, and we'll pick this thing up after November 2024. That's what's happening here, in my opinion. In my opinion, that is what's happening here. And it's really interesting. You read the stories about the U.S. depleted uranium, and it's so interesting to read the Collective West stories and articles that are coming out about the depleted uranium. And basically, they're coming out and they're saying, you know, depleted uranium that we're providing to Ukraine is really not that bad. It's not bad for the environment. It's not bad for the health of civilians. It's not bad for the health of soldiers. American, U.S. depleted uranium is actually quite good for you. It's quite healthy. That's basically the argument that they're coming out and making. You even had the Pentagon spokesperson, I believe her name is Singh. I think that's her name. She said this, and I quote, "I would push back on the assertion from Russian officials here. The CDC has stated that there is no evidence that the depleted uranium rounds cause cancer." So the Kremlin has come out and they said that sending depleted uranium is obviously it's terrible for the health of civilians. It's terrible for the health of soldiers. It's terrible for the environment. It causes cancer. It's a war crime. You know, they came out and they said all of these things, and then you have the Pentagon spokesperson coming out and saying, yeah, you know, what the Russians are claiming about depleted uranium, it's the CDC, the Pentagon. We're saying that that's not the case. That's not the issue here. Depleted uranium that comes from the U.S. is all good. It's all good. Nothing to worry about. So that's the statement from the Pentagon. It's just really interesting to listen to these statements and read these articles about how U.S. depleted uranium is good. Depleted uranium from other countries, like Russian depleted uranium, really bad. Chinese depleted uranium, really bad. Iranian depleted uranium, really, really bad. But U.S. American depleted uranium, it's all good for you. It's very, very healthy. Very, very, very good. Very good stuff. It's unbelievable. It really is unbelievable. The collective West is making a case for the benefits of using depleted uranium in a conflict. Pretty incredible stuff. It's not a war crime when they use it. It's a war crime when other countries use it. So I just wanted to say that. So that's what's going on here. That is what I believe is happening with Blinken's trip, with this article from the Washington Post, with getting the ATACMS and eventually the Taurus missiles to Ukraine. They're going to push for a freeze and to tie everything up, to tie it all up and connect all the dots in this theory that I'm putting out there. You had Boris Johnson in Kiev. Boris Johnson was in Kiev yesterday. He actually traveled to Lviv first, and then he went to Kiev. Now, the last time, I don't know if it was the last time, but the real big time, like the big event when Boris went to Kiev was, of course, to tell the Elensky regime to break the agreement that they initialed way in the beginning of the SMO, where they initialed that agreement to end the conflict. And this was end of March, early April. Boris traveled to Kiev and he told Elensky, break the agreement. I know you initialed it. I know you agreed to secession in hostilities, but break it. There's going to be no peace. There's going to be no end to the conflict. We're going to support you 100%, Elensky. We're going to give you all the money and all the weapons you need, and we're going to place a ton of sanctions on Russia. We're going to destroy their economy, and we're going to win this conflict with Russia. That's what he told Elensky. Elensky said, okay. They tore up the agreement that they agreed to with Russia in Turkey, and the rest, we already know the rest. So that was the last time that Boris was in Kiev, or at least the last big trip that Boris made to Kiev. I think he went to Kiev a couple of more times after that, but that was the big one. That was the big one. When you talk about all the death in Ukraine and all the suffering in Ukraine, well, Boris Johnson played a very, very big role in all of this this tragedy. A very big role, if not a main role, in all the tragedy that has taken place in Kiev. And he's back in Kiev, and he was there yesterday. So why was Boris in Kiev? I think it has to do with all of this freezing of the conflict. If I were to take a guess, I would say it's because Boris went there following Blinken's trip to Kiev. I think Boris, being Elensky's best buddy, and he is Elensky's absolute best buddy. So let's go this way. He went to Kiev to tell Elensky, this is how it's going to be. You're going to get your ATACMS. You're going to get the Taurus missiles. You're going to attack Crimea. You're going to attack the Russian Federation. We're going to try to pressure Russia and force Russia into agreeing to this conflict freeze. And we're going to freeze this thing. The U.S. is going to have their elections. You're going to have your elections, Elensky. In 2024, you're going to obviously get reelected because you've pretty much put all the other political parties in prison, right? So, I mean, there's really no one to run against Elensky. But you're going to have your elections. And after November 2024, after the elections wrap up in the US, we'll revisit Project Ukraine. I think he went to Kiev to also, not to break the news that Blinken broke to Elensky, but to convince his buddy, Elensky, little buddy, hey, little buddy, he went there to convince his little buddy that this is the best way forward. That's why Boris was in Kiev, if I had to take a guess. Anyway, let's move on now to Podolyak, Elensky's BFF. So Boris is Elensky's BFF and Podolyak is Elensky's BFF, right? So Podolyak, this guy is losing his mind. He's entered a very dark place. Not that his mind was what's the word that I'm looking for? It's late at night. Not that Podolyak was altogether up there, but he's really going into a dark place, Podolyak. He really, really is going cuckoo crazy. And he said that the Vatican and the Pope's effort to find some sort of peace in Ukraine is not going to work. It's flawed. And he said that the Pope would cheat Ukraine. He said that the Pope was pro-Russian. And then he implied that Moscow has bribed the Pope and the Vatican. This guy, man. This guy is going cuckoo crazy. It's not going well for Ukraine because Podolyak is starting to panic in a big, big way, and he's losing his mind. And then he said that Elon Musk committed evil. So he's not only antagonizing the Pope, and he's calling the Pope a Putin puppet, he's also going after Elon Musk, and he is saying that Musk committed an evil connected to the news about Starlink that came out the other day. And he said that because Musk deactivated Starlink, even though Musk said that Starlink was never active, but according to CNN and according to Isaacson's book, Musk deactivated Starlink, and he prevented Starlink from being used by the collective West, by NATO, and by Ukraine to destroy the Russian fleet in Sevastopol. And he's saying that when Musk did that, he committed a terrible evil. And because Ukraine wasn't given the ability to attack the Russian fleet in Sevastopol, this gave Russia the ability to continue to fight the war and to continue to attack Ukraine. So he said that Musk is the person responsible for Russia's attack on Ukraine because he didn't deactivate Starlink. So that's what Podolyak said. There are reports, actually, speaking about Musk, there are reports that, according to the Washington Post, that Musk, before he decided to block Starlink, that he actually spoke with the Russian ambassador to the United States. And the Russian ambassador told Musk that if he gives the okay to the Elensky regime and to NATO to use Starlink to attack Sevastopol, then the Russians would escalate this to World War III levels. And according to the Washington Post, that freaked Musk out. And that was one of the main reasons why Musk deactivated Starlink for the Ukraine military. Once again, Musk said on Twitter that he never deactivated Starlink because Starlink was never active to begin with. But we're going off of the narrative of the collective West and CNN and Isaacson's book, which claims that Starlink was active and Musk deactivated it. I believe Musk. I think if anyone would know the status of Starlink, it would be Musk. But anyway, CNN, fake news CNN, is trying to push a different narrative. And And I think a lot of this is connected to Ukraine, trying to put a lot of blame on the Ukraine conflict, the failure of the Ukraine conflict, trying to put some of that blame on Musk. But I think a lot of this is just part of the general smearing and demonization of Musk that the mainstream media is undertaking, because obviously they don't like Musk. They don't like the fact that Musk bought Twitter. And whenever they get a chance to smear him or demonize him or blame him for something, they're going to take that opportunity. So, yes, this is about Ukraine, but more than anything, it's about blaming Musk for the failure of Ukraine, and it's just about blaming Musk in general for all the problems of the world. It's, let's blame it on Musk, right? That's just part of the general narrative that the mainstream media now has towards Elon Musk. So I thought that was an interesting story as well. Anyway, let's do a clown world, and we will wrap this video up. This will be a relatively short video. It's an evening video. I'm going to have to upload this as well. So let's wrap this up with a quick clown world. And this comes from Emmanuel Macron, the president of France. And he tried to give a speech to the crowds at the rugby, I think it's the Rugby World Championship that is taking place in France. And Macron was on the field, and he went to the microphone, and he wanted to kick off the event and to give a speech to all of those in attendance. And boy, did the crowd boo. This was in Paris. Did they boo and jeer? And they were just not happy to see Macron on the pitch during the rugby championship event. And I mean, the boos and the jeers were really, really loud. We're talking like super duper loud. And the reason I bring up this sporting event and the fact that the French crowds don't want Macron anywhere near this sporting event is because Macron, on the same day as the rugby matches were getting underway, Macron said that Russia has no place in Paris for the upcoming Summer Olympics. That is what Macron said. He actually, let me get his quote. He actually said, and I quote, "Obviously, there can't be a Russian flag at the Paris Olympic Games because Russia as a country has no place at the Games when it has committed war crimes and deported children. The real question that the Olympic world will have to decide is what place to give to these Russian athletes who have sometimes prepared for a lifetime for the Games and may also be victims of this regime." Macron added, acknowledging that Russian athletes may hold different views on the war. The U.S. should definitely be barred from competing at the Olympic Games because, they still illegally occupy Syria, a part of Syria. So they should definitely be banned from the Paris Olympic Games. That's without question. Macron should be banned from the Paris Olympic Games. He shouldn't be allowed to attend those games. But yeah, that's what Macron said with the Paris Olympic Games and Russia. Let's do one more clown world, a bonus clown world. This is from Forbes. The title of the article is "To Train Ukrainian Troops, the Danish military had to borrow Leopard 1 tanks from 3 museums." That's how old the Leopard tanks are. They had to take them from museums. And you know what's funny about this story, this headline from Forbes and this story from Forbes, is that the narrative was that Russia had to take tanks from museums because they were running out of tanks in order to fight the conflict. Remember that one? Remember when the collectivist media was saying that Russia is so low on tanks that they now have to go to museums in Russia and take those tanks and send them to the battlefield. That was their narrative. And now they're coming around and they're saying, you know, these Leopards are so old, so outdated, that in order to train Ukraine on these Leopards, we had to take them from museums. It's always, with the collective West media, it's always projection. Just reverse it. It's always the opposite. Reverse it, and you get to the truth. When they say that Russia is taking tanks from museums, just reverse it. Denmark is taking tanks from museums. The collective West is taking tanks from museums. And you got the truth. And you got the truth. All right. Let's walk this way. And let's wrap up this video. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter. And go to the Duran shop. Use the code GOODDAY. 10% off all merch. Take care.